Hello, and welcome to video number 9, Managing Vehicle Maintenance Costs of the online course for managing operational and capital costs at rural and small urban transit systems. This video's contents are from Module B of the full guidebook on managing system costs, and this video is the 5th video in the direct operation route of the online course, and is part of what we call the extra credit track. In one sentence, Module B provides you with strategies for managing the operational costs of any directly operated service, regardless of mode. Module B contains 4 chapters, and this video's contents are from Chapter 6, Vehicle Maintenance Costs. Let's get started. Chapter 6 covers 2 main topics. First, how to reduce maintenance demand as a strategy for reducing maintenance costs. And second, other strategies related to managing maintenance costs. By the end of this video, you should be able to identify factors that influence vehicle maintenance costs, list and describe maintenance cost reduction strategies, describe potential pros and cons of outsourcing some or all maintenance functions, and identify vehicle maintenance performance measures and vehicle data management systems. Let's get started with the first topic, reducing maintenance demand. Reducing maintenance demand can help you reduce maintenance costs. And the typical approaches you're going to use is to optimize your miles driven. Maintenance is largely driven by the miles that your vehicles operate, and therefore is a direct predictor of the amount of maintenance needed, and therefore is a direct predictor of the cost of maintenance. There are several other strategies in addition to trying to manage down the miles, and those include robust preventative maintenance practices, consistent fleet replacement, balancing mileage across the fleet, and optimizing your fleet size. Because optimizing miles driven is really something that's discussed in the video on fuel and energy costs, and also discussed in the videos on efficient scheduling and dispatching and run cutting, both in the demand response videos and in the fixed and flexible route videos. This video is going to focus mostly on these latter strategies on the bottom half of the screen, such as preventative maintenance, fleet replacement, etc. One way you can take a quick look at how your maintenance program is doing is to perform a self-assessment. Tool number 6, which is available for download from the toolkit, is a maintenance self-assessment. Tool number 6 is an Excel workbook containing a checklist to help you evaluate your maintenance management. Let's take a quick look at this tool. As you can see, the tool contains 2 tabs, a description tab, and the second tab, which is the maintenance assessment tool. There's just a simple set of yes/no questions, and you can look at these questions and answer yes or no. And of course, the answer of yes is the good answer. So if you can answer yes to most or all of these questions, then the self-assessment comes out that you're doing pretty well. If you answer no, you might identify some areas that need some adjustment in your maintenance program. Okay, let's get back to the content. Let's start with preventative maintenance. Preventative maintenance is critical because it helps you minimize the malfunctions that your vehicles might have using systematic, regularly scheduled maintenance procedures. Preventative maintenance typically is less costly than corrective maintenance because you're able to do small repairs that prevent larger issues. And preventative maintenance is less costly than road calls, that is, vehicles breaking down out while they're in revenue service. In some cases, those vehicles might need to be towed, which is a costly endeavor. Preventative maintenance is not a one-size-all thing, and you really need to tailor your preventative maintenance procedures to the specific vehicles that you have in your fleet. It's best to use some sort of tracking system to ensure that you're doing your preventative maintenance in a timely fashion. It's important to know the mileage when the last preventative maintenance activity was done to a vehicle and the date. So you're able to keep track of, particularly as your fleet gets larger, when the last PM or preventative maintenance was done, so you can know when the next one is due. Another key piece of doing preventative maintenance is tracking your performance, what's known as on-time preventative maintenance or PM on-time performance. That can be a useful performance measure because it calculates what % of all of my preventative maintenance activities are done on time, on time is usually defined as some sort of window. It's either a mileage-based window or a time-based window, depending on the preventative maintenance activity. And finally, your preventative maintenance program should be adaptable to new vehicle types and changes in operating conditions. For example, if you're getting new fleet in, maybe vehicles you haven't had before, right? You need to update your preventative maintenance practices for that particular vehicle type. There are several different considerations that are important for preventative maintenance programs. First, it's helpful to establish your service intervals, right? That is the mileage between different preventive maintenance activities as multiples of some sort of common denominator. So for instance, if you're planning to do at least an oil change and a basic check every 5,000 miles, then your other maintenance checks or preventative maintenance activities could be multiples of 5,000, so that when you bring your vehicle in, right, for your at 5,000 every 5,000 miles, then you also can accomplish other activities, perhaps something that you want to do every 25,000 miles, every 50,000 miles, or every 100,000 miles. That way you can accomplish more activity in one preventative maintenance session. Another consideration is to consider seasonal and environmental conditions that may impact your maintenance requirements and your service intervals. Right? A manufacturer might have some minimum requirements or recommendations for maintenance to be done to their particular vehicle. However, because of local factors like really hot or really cold weather, or a lot of sand or dust, or various other things that you might encounter, you're going to want to modify those recommendations to fit your local context. That way you can really optimize the vehicle performance by adapting those standard maintenance practices to your local environmental factors. A third consideration is to include a regular schedule for washing and cleaning. So this is not technically preventative maintenance as one might define it. Regular washing and cleaning, A, improves the public appearance of your vehicles and thereby, the public image that you have. And then B, it prevents acceleration of other types of standard vehicular degeneration, for instance, rust, right? So particularly if you live in an area that has corrosive minerals that might get on your vehicle's body, chassis, etc., particularly those areas that have snow and ice, and there might be salt and things like that, right? You want to keep your vehicles clean. That way you can reduce the onset of rust. Cleaning your vehicles also helps you see other issues that might be covered up or hidden by dirt and grime. In the area of maintenance, another strategy is predictive maintenance. Now, this takes on a couple of different meanings depending on who you talk to, but what we're talking about here is not sort of very complicated predictive maintenance based on the error codes in engines or some sort of complicated model. What we're talking about here is simply looking for patterns of problems in your vehicles, seeing if there's any sort of pattern in vehicles of the same type, for instance, vehicles with the same year, make, or manufacturer. And if there is a pattern of problems, for instance, maybe, widget X seems to be breaking on the vehicles that were all your 2022 vehicles made by this manufacturer A. If you see a pattern starting, it's possible that there might be similar problems in vehicles of the same type. So it might make sense to try to repair or replace that issue before the problem becomes a major repair or a road call. Another strategy to help manage maintenance costs is consistent fleet replacement. This helps you maintain a low average fleet age and also avoids peaks and valleys in your vehicle procurement cycle. By doing this, you also level peaks in maintenance demand. In order to accomplish consistent fleet replacement, it's important to have a fleet replacement plan. This plan would provide annual targets for vehicles to retire or replace, and also would identify targets for overall fleet growth. Of course, when to replace a given vehicle depends on the manufacturer, state and federal guidelines that you're following, and your local operating environment. A term that you'll hear a couple times throughout this course is useful life benchmark, particularly when we talk about managing the cost of vehicles. A useful life benchmark, or ULB, is the target in years and/or miles at which you want to replace a vehicle, and that's usually tied to your transit asset management plan. And consistent fleet replacement is also in line with FTA's state of good repair requirements. And it's also important to remember that FTA also has minimum service life guidelines for any vehicles that are funded with FTA funds. In other words, there is a minimum number of years you have to keep a vehicle if you used FTA funds to purchase it. Again, the best way to have consistent fleet replacement is to develop and follow a fleet replacement plan. Certainly these days it might be difficult for transit agencies to adhere to their original fleet replacement plan due to vehicle shortages, the increasing prices of vehicles, etc. But it's still important to try to have one and keep it updated so that you have a clear plan in place once the funding and vehicles are available. Also, without a fleet replacement plan and sort of showing what you want to do compared to what's actually happening, it's difficult to demonstrate the need. So a fleet replacement plan also can help you compare the benchmark of what you want to do or need to do to keep your fleet up to date versus what's actually happening due to vehicle shortages or funding shortfalls. Another strategy for managing maintenance costs is balancing mileage across the fleet. So when you think about having a vehicle fleet, you have all these vehicles and you want to try to keep them for as long as you can before, of course, or up to the point when those vehicles start to become too costly to maintain or they're very, very inefficient, right? So you want to get as much life, as much use out of every vehicle that you have. So ideally, it's best to have your fleet age proportionally. And what we mean by that is that your vehicles accrue miles in line with their age, right? The number of miles that a vehicle accrues is in line with how old it is. The older the vehicle, the more miles it should have on it. You don't want individual vehicles accruing a disproportionate number of miles, especially relative to their age. So if you have some vehicles that are maybe only halfway through their life, but in terms of years, however, have accrued so many miles, they're basically not usable anymore. That's not good because then that vehicle is going to become non-usable for you or very, very expensive to maintain. So the goal here is to try to ensure that vehicles do not reach one useful life milestone, for instance, the number of miles you want to keep a vehicle for. Um, you don't want them to reach one useful life milestone before reaching the other, for instance, their age. Now, there's some exceptions to this. Some agencies may have some policies that dictate specific usages for maybe a short-term period. For instance, some agencies choose to use newer vehicles on longer distance trips when so when that vehicle first comes into the fleet, they might be sending it out on the longer trips, accruing a lot more mileage than the older vehicles, at least in the beginning. And that's fine as long as that's your policy and you're working to actually manage still over the long run of that vehicle's life. You know that it's going to start accruing less and less miles as it gets older, so that by the time it reaches its useful life in terms of miles, it will also have reached its useful life in terms of age. This slide shows you what an imbalance in vehicle mileage might look like. As you can see in the table, there are a total of 5 vehicles, 3 of which are light-duty vans and 2 heavy-duty small buses. You can see their model year or in-service year, how old they are, odometer mileage, the useful life benchmark in years for each particular vehicle. You'll notice the light-duty vans have a ULB of 6 years. The heavy-duty small buses have a ULB of 12. You can see the ULB in miles in the next column to the right. You can see the ULB in miles for the light-duty vans is 150,000 miles, and for the heavy-duty small buses, 420,000 miles. Calculated then in the far right 2 columns are the percentage of ULB, both in age and miles. So there's a column here that has the percentage to ULB in terms of age. That, in other words, is how far along is this vehicle toward the age ULB, right? So this first vehicle, this light-duty van, is 5 years old, and the ULB is 6 years, which means that this percentage to ULB is 83%, 5 out of 6. But you'll notice that the percent to ULB in terms of miles is only 33% because it has only accrued 50,000 miles. The ULB is 150,000 miles, and so it's only 1/3 towards the ULB in miles. And this is an example of an imbalance, right? This vehicle has not accrued as many miles as it should have and is reaching the ULB due to age, even though it should have really a lot of useful life left in all of the main mechanical components because it's only at 33% of the targeted miles. You can see a few other imbalances as you go down the list, none of which are quite as significant as that first vehicle. If you want to see a good example of what a balance might look like, you can see the 2019 heavy-duty small buses, the last two vehicles in the table, are at 33% toward the ULB in age and 30% toward the ULB in mileage, which suggests that these vehicles are being used appropriately. And in the long run, as long as you maintain that balance in both age and mileage, then you really should maximize the use of the asset by the time it reaches its ULB. Another strategy for managing maintenance costs is optimizing the size of your fleet. The reality is that the amount of service you're scheduled to deliver, which is often a function of passenger demand, will largely dictate the number of vehicles that you need to deliver peak service. So there's not a lot of control you have over that. So how do you optimize fleet size? Well, there's really two main strategies. One is to implement strategies to optimize the amount of service you're actually providing. And that could be through demand management or more efficient scheduling and dispatching. Those strategies are discussed in other videos. Another strategy you have at your fingertips is controlling the spare ratio. It's recommended to try to keep your spare ratio somewhere between 10 and 20%, but that largely depends on fleet size. Smaller fleets are going to need larger spare ratios. So if you're interested in learning more about what you can do to try to control your spare ratio or other strategies for optimizing fleet size, check out videos from Module E. In particular, look at video number 18, Managing Vehicle Capital Costs. All right, so let's pause and do a few review questions. First, describe how consistent fleet replacement can help manage maintenance costs. Pause the video, and I'll be back with the answer. Consistent fleet replacement is critical because it helps you keep the fleet age lower, right? And older vehicles do tend to have higher maintenance costs. Consistent fleet replacement also helps you to reduce those costs associated with getting a bunch of new vehicles in at the same time or retiring a bunch of vehicles at the same time, because there's labor and other types of costs associated with an influx or a major outflow of vehicles. Consistent fleet replacement also helps you flatten maintenance demand, so you don't have these big peaks of a bunch of vehicles all coming due at the same time or all getting old at the same time, therefore increasing your maintenance demand. Here's another review question. Why is it important to balance mileage across your fleet? Pause the video and I'll be back with an answer. It's a couple reasons. One, it helps you to get the most out of the assets you have over their lifespan. Again, if you spent all this money on this vehicle, you definitely want to get as much use out of it as possible, and that includes mileage. And so if you're balancing mileage across your fleet so that no single vehicle is accruing more mileage than it should be relative to its age, that can help you maximize the use of every vehicle you have. Balancing miles across your fleet also does help flatten maintenance demand over a vehicle's life cycle. Right? If you're putting a lot of miles on a single vehicle or a subset of vehicles, they're going to require more maintenance on those particular vehicles, and other vehicles are not going to get as much. So that's another benefit of balancing mileage across your fleet. Here's another review question. What are some considerations for an effective preventive maintenance program? Pause your video and I'll be back with an answer. There are many considerations we discussed prior in this video. First, preventive maintenance should be regular, systematic, documented, monitored, and you should also measure your on-time performance of preventive maintenance so you understand if you're getting your PMs done on time. It's important when setting your preventive maintenance program up to take into account the different vehicle types you have, also looking at manufacturers' recommendations, as well as modifying those recommendations due to local operating conditions. And last, it's good to try to schedule your preventive maintenance activities in multiples of whatever the lowest trigger is, right? So if your baseline PM is 5,000 miles, then you want your more robust PMs at intervals of 5,000 miles, multiples of 5,000 miles, like 10, 15, 20, 25, etc. Now let's move on to a few other strategies beyond managing maintenance demand. These include improving parts cost efficiency, maintenance hour labor efficiency, and considering outsourced maintenance. Parts cost efficiency is an important consideration because there are many parts that need to be replaced over a vehicle's life cycle. And there's many commonly replaced parts, and that includes things that wear out with regular use, like tires, brakes, fuses, and even transmissions, right? There's very common for over the life cycle of a vehicle to maybe have to replace the transmission or do some sort of an overhaul. Parts cost efficiency is calculated as the miles driven per dollar spent on parts. And if you're trying to improve parts cost efficiency, that basically means you're trying to get more miles out of every dollar you spend on parts. Now, how do you improve parts cost efficiency? Well, it can be increased by, as we discussed before, having robust preventive maintenance practices. A couple other strategies are carefully choosing parts and parts suppliers, and also tracking and leveraging parts warranties. The reality is there's typically a trade-off between a part's cost and the longevity of that part. All things being equal, usually a better made part, maybe even with a better warranty, is going to cost a little bit more than a part that's cheaper. And so it's important to keep careful records in both the ideas of looking for the balance point between, part cost and part longevity, and also when looking to try to claim warranties on parts. If you don't have good records to help you know when the part was purchased, when the part was actually installed on the vehicle, which vehicle that even was, what was the mileage on the vehicle, right? If you don't have that data, it's very hard to go back and say, hey, is this part still under warranty or not? And even if so, how do you prove that the part you're taking back, is still under warranty? That it's not like you have one vehicle, right, that you're trying to maintain. You have several. So it's very, very important to keep good parts records, particularly know how much the part cost, when it was installed, etc. That way you can both analyze your data in order to understand the trade-offs between part cost and part longevity, as well as apply warranties and get credit where credit is due. It's also possible, if you have enough time and resources, to actually conduct parts tests. Doing a parts test usually requires that you're collecting good data, and you'd want to have multiple types of a single part and install it on different vehicles, and basically let those vehicles run the service as typical and collect data on how well the parts perform. This might give you some information to help you know which part is the best for your particular operating context. You also might want to look at evaluating the cost effectiveness of leasing programs. For instance, tire leasing programs. There are options out there of different things you can lease, and it might be more cost effective than actually buying the parts outright. There's several other strategies when it comes to parts cost efficiency discussed in Chapter 6 of the guidebook. The next other strategy deals with maintenance labor hours, and specifically trying to improve maintenance labor hour efficiency. What is labor hour efficiency? It's really getting the most maintenance benefit for every hour of maintenance, right? So an hour of maintenance, of course, costs money. You're paying a mechanic, and you want to get the biggest bang for your buck out of that hour of maintenance, getting the most benefit from it. And part of the challenge when it comes to maintenance labor hour efficiency is making sure that every hour a mechanic has is used as best it can be, not having too many mechanics where you sort of have slack time or unproductive time, and also not having too little mechanics, which might generate overtime or get you behind in your maintenance. And so there's several strategies discussed in Chapter 6 of the guidebook, as well as a tool, and I'm going to show you that tool here. It's tool number 7. We call it the Mechanic Staffing Calculator. This is an Excel workbook that helps you calculate the necessary number of maintenance staff, given your fleet's maintenance requirements and the number of hours available for maintenance work. Again, you can download this tool from the toolkit, and let's take a look at it together. The maintenance staffing calculator has 4 tabs, including a description tab, a fleet maintenance tab, the number of mechanics, and a help sheet. So I'll skip over the description tab and let you read it on your own time. The fleet maintenance tab is essentially where you put in what maintenance you do on your vehicles. You can see there's several inputs, including the average annual miles per vehicle, total number of vehicles, and then you also input your PM inspection activities, both those that are mileage based and time based. You can put those in. You can also put in an estimate of your unscheduled or corrective maintenance, including any special campaigns. If you put that, if you put those inputs in there, including how many of these you do and how long they take to complete, you can ultimately produce an annual hours per vehicle and an annual hours for the entire fleet. This helps you to know, hey, how many hours of maintenance labor do I actually need in order to do all the stuff that I need to do for maintenance? You can compare that with your mechanic availability. You start by inputting the data of your current number of mechanics, how many days they work per year, how many paid hours per day, and what's the average daily hours spent on other duties like cleaning their bay or something like that. You can input the holidays, vacations, sick leave, and other types of absences. Ultimately, what this is trying to do is figure out, well, out of the mechanics you have, after you consider their time away from actually turning a wrench, how many hours are available to actually do the maintenance work? If you remember on the prior tab, we saw that we need at least 7,325 annual hours of actual maintenance work to accomplish all of our maintenance activities. And if we compare that with the number of mechanics we currently have and how many hours we can actually get out of our mechanics, we see that we actually need about 5.5 mechanics in order to make this happen, right? That's basically how many hours each mechanic can do a year, which is 1,340 according to all of our measures of unavailability. And we're dividing how many hours are needed divided by the annual hours available per mechanic. And that gives us 5.5. We compare that with what we have right now, back at the top, and we only have 4. So according to this calculator, it looks like we're short by 1.5 mechanics. The third and final topic is using outsourced maintenance. Now, this is a common practice for managing costs. It can be done for major repairs, things like engine overhauls, body work, and HVAC work, often because those things, one, are specialized, and so you really have to have a highly qualified mechanic or technician to do that kind of work, and you might also have to have special equipment for doing that kind of work. So when you're comparing, having the specialized mechanic that you're going to have to pay more and having the specialized equipment that you're only going to use every now and then, it might make more sense to outsource certain kinds of major repairs. Of course, you need to consider whether your staff do have this expertise, whether you already do have the equipment you need, and also consider that if you are outsourcing maintenance, particularly to an off-site location of some kind, that you do have to move the vehicle, particularly if it can't run, right? So there's going to be towing costs, or even driving the vehicle to a maintenance facility, of course, accrues costs. Another option for outsourcing maintenance is working with nearby transit agencies or local governments that also do their own fleet management. They might have that specialized equipment and staff to be able to do the kinds of maintenance you're considering outsourcing, and it might in the end be cheaper because these agencies or governments aren't trying to make a profit. Of course, if you are contracting out maintenance, be sure to monitor the contractor for the efficiency of their work and the effectiveness of their work. There are, sort of horror stories of transit agencies, school districts, etc., that outsource their maintenance to a third party, and that third party either wasn't doing a good job or in some cases wasn't even doing anything and was just basically billing right the transportation company and saying, hey, yeah, we did this work. And it's because they weren't being watched. Nobody was double checking what the third party was doing, and so it wasn't discovered until it was too late. It's important to also, if you're going to be outsourcing your maintenance, to use a best value consideration, and get quotes, get bids from multiple potential providers. And obviously, this isn't just about the cost, right? You want the best value if you're going to be outsourcing your maintenance. And that means having the highest quality maintenance with the most qualified mechanics, a provider that gives you a warranty or there's some sort of guarantee of the quality of their work, right? It might be worth it, even if you have to pay a little bit more per hour or in markup. So let's look at a couple review questions. First, name and describe a strategy for managing parts costs. Pause the video and I'll be back with the answer. All right, so if you thought about any one of these three strategies, you are right. One is having robust preventative maintenance practices. A second is carefully choosing your parts and your parts suppliers. And a third is tracking and leveraging parts warranties. Here's another question. Why might a transit agency want to outsource some maintenance? Pause the video and I'll be back with the answer. There's several reasons a transit agency might want to outsource some maintenance. It can be a common practice for managing costs just because it might be cheaper to outsource maintenance. It might be more appropriate to outsource maintenance when you're talking about major repairs, things like engine overhauls, body work, and HVAC work. And some agencies just simply might not have sufficient specialized expertise to perform the maintenance on their vehicles, and so they have no other choice but to outsource. If you are outsourcing, of course, remember to try to get a good deal, high quality work, and always check over the work done by the contractor. Here's another review question. Name one or more considerations when outsourcing maintenance. Pause the video and I'll be back with the answer. Here's just a few. Consider vehicle transport costs as a part of the outsourcing cost. Don't forget about working with nearby agencies or governments that manage their own fleets. They might be able to help you perform some of those repairs. If maintenance is contracted out, make sure you're monitoring the contractor for their efficiency and effectiveness, and use a best value consideration. And when you're getting those quotes or bids, right, and you really want to get the best buy, which means the most highest quality maintenance work done at the most reasonable price. Okay, here's the key takeaways from this video. First, track and evaluate fleet and maintenance performance measures as a way to improve maintenance cost efficiency. Have a standardized, robust preventive maintenance program tied to benchmarks, knowing when you need to do all of your PMs, and make sure that it follows manufacturer recommendations and incorporates your local context. Have a vehicle replacement plan to ensure that you're consistently replacing vehicles in your fleet. Keep vehicle miles in line with vehicle age, which helps you maximize the use of your vehicles. Maintain a target spare ratio. This helps you to optimize your fleet size. Maintain detailed records of parts and parts use. This is important for knowing your parts cost efficiency, as well as knowing if you can claim warranties on certain parts. Maximize the maintenance performed for every hour of maintenance labor paid. This means making sure that the buses are available when the mechanics are, and that you have the right number of mechanics doing the right amount of work. Outsourcing maintenance is an option and can improve cost effectiveness in some circumstances. It's important to carefully consider that option and balance it against the cost of doing things in-house. There are additional information, resources, and references found in Chapter 6 of the guidebook. We encourage you to check them out and to watch the other videos of this online course. Thanks for watching. Links to the full guidebook and toolkit are in the video description, which is where you can also find a link to a short online evaluation form for this specific video. Please fill out that form if this is the first time you've watched this video, because we use that data to help improve this course. If you want to continue the extra credit track of the direct operation route of this online course, consider watching video number 10, Other Operational Cost Management. The extra credit track also includes video number 17 on capital costs, video 19 on technology costs, or video 20 called Looking Ahead, Innovations and Cost Management. If you have any questions, send them to the email address provided in the video description.